Wealth and corporate titles create an illusion of absolute power. Arrogance blinds those who sit in glass corner offices, making them forget that real authority isn't inherited or bought. True leadership operates in the shadows, forging unbreakable loyalty through sacrifice until the moment it finally steps into the light. The valet at the sprawling Hamptons estate hesitated for a fraction of a second when I pulled up in my unassuming matte black sedan. It was surrounded by a sea of candy-colored Lamborghinis, vintage Aston Martins, and armored Maybachs. I tossed him the keys, ignoring the slight purse of his lips, and adjusted the cuffs of my tailored, yet remarkably plain, charcoal blazer. I hadn't worn my dress blues. In my line of work, anonymity wasn't just a preference. It was a strict operational requirement. Tonight was our father's 60th birthday, a milestone that my older brother, Rogelio, had hijacked to serve as a networking gala for his booming tech conglomerate. Rogelio was the golden child, the billionaire CEO who had graced the cover of Forbes before his 30th birthday. He traded in algorithms, data acquisitions, and ruthless corporate takeovers. I, on the other hand, was the public servant. Whenever anyone asked, Rogelio told them I worked in logistics for the Navy, a pencil pusher buried deep within the bureaucratic labyrinth of the Pentagon, counting boots and ordering rations on a meager government salary. I let him believe it. It was safer that way. The moment I stepped through the massive mahogany double doors, the overwhelming scent of imported orchids and expensive ambergris cologne washed over me. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner of a grand foyer lined with Renaissance art that Rogelio had probably bought at auction without knowing the artists' names. Waiters in pristine white tuxedos floated through the crowd, carrying trays of beluga caviar and champagne that cost more than a junior enlisted sailor made in a month. Well, look who finally managed to get a weekend pass. A booming, impossibly smug voice echoed over the chatter. I braced myself and turned. Rogelio was descending the sweeping marble staircase, a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand, flanked by two men who reeked of hedge fund money. He wore a bespoke Italian suit that fit like a second skin, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Rogelio," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Happy to be here. Where's Dad?" "He's around here somewhere, probably boring the board of directors with stories about his old hardware store," Rogelio chuckled, clapping me on the shoulder with a heavy, patronizing hand. He turned to his sycophants. "Gentlemen, my little sister, Stephanie. She's taking a break from the glamorous world of naval supply chains. Tell me, Stephanie, did you manage to get that requisition form for the new office chairs approved yet?" The two men laughed on cue. I offered a tight, polite smile. "Logistics is the backbone of any operation, Rogelio. You should know that, given your current supply chain issues in Shenzhen." His smile faltered for a microsecond before the arrogant veneer slipped back into place. "Oh, we fixed that with a stroke of a pen and a check with a lot of zeros. That's how the real world works, sis. You know, if you ever get tired of living off the taxpayer's dime, I have a junior administrative position opening up in HR. It pays double what the government gives you. You could finally upgrade from that dreary sedan." "I like my sedan," I replied evenly. "It's reliable." "It's depressing," Rogelio countered, waving his hand dismissively. "But enough about your desk job. Tonight is about the future. I'm closing a Series C funding round tonight that will make my company untouchable. I have international investors here. High net worth individuals. Please, try to mingle. But don't bore them with talk about shipping manifests, okay?" Before I could respond, our father, Thomas, shuffled through the crowd. He looked a bit lost in the grandeur of his son's house, wearing a comfortable but slightly dated tweed jacket. His face lit up when he saw me. "Stephanie, you made it," he said, wrapping me in a warm hug. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Dad. Happy birthday." I smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. Rogelio checked his Rolex, a platinum monstrosity studded with diamonds. "Dad, don't keep her all to yourself. I need to introduce you to Adelard. He's the key to the entire European expansion." Rogelio gestured toward a tall, sharply dressed man entering the room from the terrace. He was flanked by four massive men whose posture and wandering eyes screamed private security. But it wasn't the guards that caught my attention. It was the man himself. Adelard Ruiz. My blood ran cold, though my heart rate remained perfectly steady. Years of training kicked in, masking the sudden spike of adrenaline behind a placid expression. Rogelio thought he was dealing with a wealthy European venture capitalist. I knew exactly who Adelard Ruiz was. I had spent the last 8 months staring at his photograph on a classified corkboard in a secure compartmentalized information facility, SCIF, in Virginia. Ruiz wasn't a venture capitalist. He was a high-level facilitator for a sanctioned Eastern European weapons syndicate, currently under investigation by Joint Special Operations Command for laundering dirty money through American tech startups to bypass federal embargoes. "Come along, Stephanie," Rogelio insisted, grabbing my elbow. "Come meet the man who's going to make me a trillionaire." I allowed myself to be led forward, my mind racing through tactical protocols and threat assessments. I was unarmed, wearing heels, in a room full of soft civilian targets. "Adelard," Rogelio beamed, extending a hand. "Allow me to introduce my father Thomas and my sister Stephanie. She's in the Navy. Clerical work, mostly." Ruiz's eyes, cold and reptilian, swept over my father before locking onto me. He offered a charming, predatory smile. "A pleasure. I have a great deal of respect for the military. Keeping the books balanced is vital work. It has its moments," I replied, maintaining direct eye contact just a fraction of a second longer than socially acceptable. Ruiz's smile didn't waver, but I saw the subtle shift in his gaze, a flicker of calculation. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was just the billionaire's unremarkable sister. But he was naturally suspicious of anyone who didn't immediately cower before his wealth. "Rogelio tells me your company is on the verge of a breakthrough in localized, untraceable, encrypted networks," I said casually, dropping a breadcrumb. Rogelio shot me a furious, warning glare. "Stephanie, please. Adelard isn't here to talk shop with the back office." "Oh, I don't mind," Ruiz purred. "Yes, your brother has developed something very valuable, something that requires aggressive protection and substantial investment. I am simply here to provide both." I stepped back, letting the conversation flow around me, but my eyes remained fixed on Ruiz's security detail. They weren't typical bodyguards. They carried themselves with the rigid, hyper-vigilant discipline of seasoned mercenaries. One of them had a distinct, jagged scar running along his jawline, a hallmark of a very specific, very brutal private military contractor group operating out of the lawless regions of North Africa. Rogelio was playing a game of Monopoly. He didn't realize he was sitting at a table playing Russian roulette. I needed to get him alone, and I needed a secure line to my command, immediately. The dinner was an agonizing affair, held in a cavernous dining room with a long mahogany table that seated 40. Crystal glasses clinked, silver scraped against fine china, and the room buzzed with the shallow, self-important laughter of the ultra-rich. I sat near the end of the table, far from the seat of honor where Rogelio held court with Ruiz. When the champagne was poured for the final time, Rogelio stood, tapping his silver spoon against his glass. The room fell into an obedient, hushed silence. "Friends, colleagues, investors," Rogelio began, projecting his voice with practiced charisma, "we are here tonight to celebrate my father, Thomas, the man who taught me that to conquer the world, you must never accept no for an answer." Applause rippled through the room. Thomas smiled nervously, staring down at his plate. "But tonight is also about the legacy we build," Rogelio continued, his eyes scanning the room before deliberately landing on me. "We all choose our paths. Some of us push boundaries, disrupt industries, and create billions in value. We carry the heavy burdens of true leadership. And some of us," he offered a patronizing, sympathetic sigh, "choose a simpler life. My sister, Stephanie, has dedicated her life to the government. She ensures that the cogs of bureaucracy keep turning. She doesn't have the stress of board meetings or global markets. She has the safety of a desk and a pension." The room chuckled. A few people looked at me with pity. So, Rogelio raised his glass higher. "Let's toast to Stephanie for keeping the supply closet stocked, and to my father for giving us the foundation. But most importantly, to the future of this company, a future secured by our new partnership with Mr. Blag." "Adelard Ruiz," The cheer that went up was deafening. I didn't drink. I just stared at Rogelio. The sheer blinding magnitude of his arrogance was going to get him, and possibly everyone in this room killed. As the guests transitioned from the dining room to the adjoining ballroom for brandy and cigars, I intercepted Rogelio in the hallway. I grabbed his arm, my grip entirely devoid of sisterly affection. "Hey, watch the suit, Stephanie," he snapped, yanking his arm away. "We need to talk. Now. In your study," I ordered, my voice dropping an octave, carrying the hardened edge of a commanding officer rather than a compliant sibling. Rogelio blinked, momentarily taken aback by my tone, before his face flushed with irritation. "I don't have time for your jealousy right now. Adelard is waiting for me to sign the final transfer agreements." "You are not signing anything," I said, stepping into his personal space, backing him against the oak-paneled wall. "Rogelio, listen to me very carefully. Adelard Ruiz is not a venture capitalist. He is a proxy for an international arms syndicate. They want your encryption algorithm to shield their communications from global intelligence networks. The money he's giving you is soaked in blood, and once he has the tech, he has zero use for you." Rogelio stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then he burst into laughter. It was a loud, mocking, ugly sound. "Oh my God," he gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. "You are unbelievable. Truly. You spend too much time reading those ridiculous Tom Clancy novels at your desk, Stephanie. Are you insane? Do you honestly think you, a low-level paper pusher who makes 60 grand a year, has secret intelligence on a European billionaire?" "Rogelio, I am warning you." "No, I am warning you," Rogelio snarled, his amusement vanishing, replaced by vicious contempt. "You have always resented my success. You took the easy way out, hiding in a uniform so you wouldn't have to compete in the real world. Now I'm on the verge of making history, and you're trying to sabotage it with some paranoid, delusional spy fantasy? You are pathetic." He shoved past me, heading for the ballroom. "Go home, Stephanie. You're embarrassing yourself." I watched him walk away. I didn't feel anger. I felt the icy, detached clarity that comes right before a combat drop. I reached into my clutch, bypassing my lipstick, and pulled out a heavily encrypted satellite communicator, disguised as a compact mirror. I pressed the biometric scanner, typed a brief alphanumeric code, and hit send. Code black. Target Ruiz active. Civilian presence high. Request immediate tactical exfil. Containment. I barely had time to slide the device back into my bag when the atmosphere in the house violently shifted. The string quartet abruptly stopped playing. A woman screamed in the ballroom. I moved silently down the hallway, peering around the corner. The heavy oak doors to the estate had been barricaded. Ruiz's 4 mercenaries had drawn suppressed submachine guns from beneath their tailored jackets. 2 more heavily armed men had appeared from the kitchen, dragging the head of Rogelio's private security detail by his collar, tossing him onto the marble floor where he lay groaning, bleeding from a head wound. Panic erupted. The billionaires and socialites who, moments ago, had felt like masters of the universe were now cowering behind velvet sofas and imported statues, sobbing and clutching their jewelry. Adelard Ruiz stood in the center of the room, calmly swirling a glass of cognac. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm." Ruiz's voice was smooth, amplifying over the chaos. "This is simply a slight renegotiation of terms. No one needs to be harmed, provided my friend Rogelio is cooperative." Rogelio stepped forward, his face pale, but his arrogant pride still foolishly blinding him to the reality of the situation. "Adelard, what the hell is this? Tell your men to put those guns down immediately, or I will have you destroyed. My lawyers." Before Rogelio could finish his sentence, the mercenary with the jagged jawline stepped forward and struck Rogelio in the stomach with the butt of his rifle. Rogelio collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, clutching his tailored suit. "Your lawyers are not here, Rogelio," Ruiz said softly, walking over and looking down at my brother with utter disdain. "You are a very smart boy with computers, but a very stupid man in the real world. You see, I am not buying a stake in your company. I am taking your encryption key. You will log into your server, transfer the master files to my encrypted drive, and then we will leave. If you refuse, my men will start shooting your guests. We can begin with your father." One of the mercenaries grabbed Thomas roughly by the shoulder, shoving the barrel of a gun against his temple. Rogelio, kneeling on the floor, looked up. The illusion of his absolute power had shattered. His money, his titles, his corner office, none of it meant anything against the cold, hard steel of a loaded weapon. He was terrified, weeping, entirely broken. From the shadows of the hallway, I assessed the room. 6 hostiles, fully armored under their suits. Superior firepower. I was alone, unarmed, with 40 civilians in the crossfire. But I wasn't panicking. I wasn't a desk clerk. I was Commander Stephanie Hall, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, and I knew something Adelard Ruiz didn't. My backup was already falling from the sky. Tension wrapped around the grand ballroom like a suffocating wire. Adelard Ruiz stood over Thomas, the barrel of the suppressed weapon pressing ominously against the older man's temple. Rogelio remained frozen on his knees, his expensive Italian suit crumpled, his previous bravado entirely evaporated. The billionaire tech mogul was trembling, staring at the gun threatening the life of the man who raised him. 10 seconds, Rogelio Ruiz announced, his voice devoid of any human empathy. 10 seconds before I paint this beautiful marble floor. We can avoid this mess if you simply walk over to the terminal and provide the encryption keys. 9, 8. Time seemed to dilate. Civilians whimpered behind overturned tables. The mercenaries kept their rifles raised, scanning the hostages with predatory detachment. From the shadowed alcove near the service corridor, the tactical layout of the room mapped itself out in my mind. 6 armed hostiles. 4 guarding the perimeter, 1 securing the main exit, and the man with the jagged jawline holding the weapon to Thomas's head. 7. 6. Ruiz continued, swirling his cognac. I slipped my heels off, leaving them silently on the carpeted runner of the hallway. Barefoot, I moved with absolute silence toward the massive electrical breaker panel concealed behind a decorative mahogany screen just outside the ballroom's secondary entrance. Every operative in Naval Special Warfare Development Group learns to manipulate their environment before firing a single shot. Darkness is our oldest ally. 5, 4, the count echoed. Rogelio sobbed, finally breaking. Okay, stop! I'll do it! Just don't hurt him! A wise decision, Ruiz smiled, gesturing for the mercenary to step back. Lead the way to the server room, Rogelio, swiftly. Before Rogelio could even stand, I gripped the main power lever inside the breaker box and ripped it downward. The sprawling Hamptons estate plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. Panic instantly detonated in the room. Screams erupted from the party guests as the sudden deprivation of sight triggered pure primal terror. Stay still! Nobody move! Switch to night vision! Ruiz barked, his calm demeanor finally cracking. They were fast, but they were not Tier 1. The distinct clicking of the mercenaries, lowering their night vision goggles, echoed in the dark, giving me exactly a 2-second window. I didn't need to see. I had already memorized the spatial coordinates of the closest threat. I lunged from the doorway, closing the distance to the guard, securing the perimeter near the entrance. Striking low, I swept his legs out from under him. As he fell, I intercepted his rifle, driving the stock upward into his throat. He collapsed with a choked gasp, entirely neutralized before his body even hit the floor. I stripped the suppressed submachine gun from his limp hands and unclipped his spare magazines. Status! Report! The mercenary with the jagged jawline shouted. A heavy, rhythmic thumping suddenly vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the synchronized, muffled sound of heavily modified MH-60 Black Hawk helicopters hovering in stealth mode just above the estate's glass atrium. Before Ruiz or his men could comprehend the sound, the reinforced skylights above the ballroom completely shattered. Glass rained down like glittering diamonds in the moonlight, followed instantly by the blinding, deafening detonation of 4 synchronized flashbang grenades. The brilliant white magnesium flashes overwhelmed the mercenaries' night vision goggles, blinding them completely and sending them staggering backward in agonizing pain. Through the smoke and falling glass, dark silhouettes descended from the ceiling on fast ropes. They moved with terrifying, orchestrated precision. 12 men, clad in full tactical gear, panoramic night vision optics, and carrying suppressed MiG-18 carbines, flooded the room. These weren't regular soldiers. They were the apex predators of the modern battlefield Navy SEALs, specifically DevGru, operating on my direct beacon. "Target acquired! Weapons free!" a deep voice commanded over the chaos. The engagement lasted exactly 4 seconds. The SEALs moved through the room like phantoms. Suppressed gunfire spat short, controlled bursts. The mercenaries, elite as they thought they were, stood absolutely zero chance against a coordinated Tier 1 breach. They were systematically disarmed and forced to the ground with overwhelming physical force before they could even squeeze their triggers. Clear right, clear left, hold, hostiles neutralized. The tactical lights mounted on the SEALs' rifles clicked on, cutting through the lingering smoke from the flashbangs and illuminating the devastation. The entire mercenary team was zip-tied and face down on the floor. The emergency backup generators finally kicked in, flooding the ballroom with a dim, amber light. Adelard Ruiz was pinned against the mahogany dining table, his arms wrenched behind his back by a massive SEAL operator. The European syndicate boss was bleeding from a cut above his eye, his arrogant smirk replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. Rogelio was cowering beneath a serving cart, clutching his head, screaming incoherently. Thomas sat near the wall, shell-shocked but unharmed, staring at the heavily armed soldiers who had just dropped from the sky. I stepped fully into the light of the backup generators, still holding the captured submachine gun, my bare feet standing amidst the shattered glass. I lowered the weapon, engaging the safety, and walked calmly toward the center of the room. The operator who had called the breach a towering man with a thick beard and the insignia of a master chief turned toward me. He immediately snapped his rifle to a low ready position and stood at attention. The other 11 SEALs in the room simultaneously stopped their securing procedures, turned in my direction, and mirrored the stance, offering a unified, deeply respectful nod. "Perimeter secure, target contained," Master Chief Miller reported, his voice projecting clearly across the silent, stunned room. "Awaiting your orders, boss." The word echoed in the cavernous ballroom, bouncing off the ruined Renaissance art and the shattered crystal. "Boss!" Rogelio slowly crawled out from under the serving cart, his mouth hanging open. He looked from Master Chief Miller, a man who looked like he wrestled bears for cardio, to me, his plain, boring, pencil-pushing sister in her charcoal blazer. "Stephanie?" Rogelio stammered, his voice trembling, barely a whisper. "What? What is happening? Who are these people?" "These people," I said, handing the captured weapon to an operator who quickly slung it over his shoulder, "are the United States Navy. The part that doesn't deal with requisition forms and office chairs." I walked over to where Ruiz was being held. The syndicate boss glared at me, realizing the monumental error in his intelligence gathering. "You're not a desk clerk," Ruiz spat, wincing as the zip ties cut into his wrists. "And you're not a venture capitalist, Adelard," I replied coldly. "You are under arrest for international arms trafficking, espionage, and attempted terrorism. Your syndicate's accounts have already been frozen by Cyber Command the moment I triggered the beacon. You have absolutely nothing left." I nodded to Miller. "Get him out of here. Prep him for transport to the Black Site. I'll handle the debriefing at 0400. "Copy that, Commander," Miller said. He signaled 2 operators, who hoisted Ruiz up and dragged him toward the terrace doors, disappearing into the night where the extraction choppers were waiting. The remaining SEALs began securing the area, assisting the terrified party guests, offering medical aid to the private security guards who had been assaulted earlier, and setting up a secure perimeter for the incoming federal agents. Thomas slowly got to his feet. I rushed over, dropping the hardened exterior, and pulled the old man into an embrace. "Are you okay, Dad?" I asked softly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm fine," he said, patting my back, his eyes wide as he looked at the heavily armed soldiers walking around his son's house. "I always knew that government job of yours was a little too stressful for just pushing paper." I managed a small, tired smile. "Sorry to ruin the birthday party, Dad. Best birthday I've had in years," he chuckled weakly, adjusting his tweed jacket. Certainly memorable. I turned back to the center of the room. Rogelio was standing there, staring at me as if looking at a ghost. The arrogant, untouchable billionaire was gone. In his place stood a terrified man who had just realized that his entire empire, his wealth, and his status were fragile illusions easily shattered by the harsh realities of the world. I walked up to him. He flinched, slightly, taking a half step back. "You," Rogelio started, struggling to find the words. "You command them? You're a commander?" "Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Intelligence and Operations," I stated clearly, letting the title sink in. "I spend my days tracking down men like Adelard Ruiz, men who actually run the world, Rogelio. The dark, violent parts of it that you thought you could just buy your way into." Rogelio swallowed hard, looking at the zip-tied mercenaries on the floor. He was going to kill Dad. He was going to kill all of us. "Yes, he was," I said, my tone unforgiving. "Because you were careless. You thought your money made you invulnerable. You thought arrogance was a substitute for intelligence. You let a wolf into the house because he promised you more gold, and you didn't care who you put at risk to get it." "I didn't know," he pleaded, the sheer embarrassment and shame finally breaking through his ego. "Stephanie, I swear, I didn't know who he was." "That's exactly the problem," I replied, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You don't know anything outside of your boardrooms and your stock prices. You mocked my career. You mocked the people who actually protect the very system that allows you to play your little games of Monopoly. The next time you want to belittle someone for choosing public service over private wealth, I highly suggest you remember what happened tonight." Rogelio looked down at the shattered glass around his expensive shoes. He couldn't meet my eyes. The silence between us spoke volumes. The golden child had finally been humbled, forced to confront the absolute insignificance of his corporate titles when faced with real danger. "Federal agents will be here in 10 minutes to take your statement and secure your servers," I told him, stepping back and adjusting the lapels of my blazer. "Cooperate fully. Give them everything they ask for regarding your dealings with Ruiz. If you try to hide anything to protect your stock price, I won't send the FBI. I'll come back myself. Do we understand each other?" "Yes," Rogelio whispered, completely defeated. "Yes, Stephanie. Thank you for saving us." I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked toward the grand foyer. Master Chief Miller was waiting near the shattered double doors. "Transport is waiting for you, Commander. We have a bird on the lawn." "Negative, Master Chief," I replied, grabbing my heels from the hallway and slipping them back on. I drove myself. "I'll see you at the debrief." "Safe drive, boss," Miller saluted. I walked out of the sprawling, chaotic mansion, leaving the flashing tactical lights and the shattered illusion of absolute power behind me. The valet stand was empty, the workers having fled during the commotion. I walked past the rows of candy-colored Lamborghinis and armored Maybachs until I found my vehicle parked in the back. I unlocked the doors to my unassuming matte black sedan. It wasn't flashy. It didn't cost $1 million. But as I slid into the driver's seat and the engine roared to life with a quiet, reliable hum, I smiled. It was a very good car, and tomorrow there was still work to do. If you loved this story about true leadership and the ultimate reality check, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this thrilling tale with your friends to show them that real power doesn't come from a fancy suit. And subscribe to our channel for more intense, drama-filled stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Let us know your favorite moment in the comments below.